This week on Personally Speaking, our guest is Rob Schmitt. Rob is known to you as having been a journalist attached to ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, and now Newsmax. A great, honest, direct journalist. Stay with us for our interview with Rob Schmitt. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and journalist Rob Schmitt joins me now. Rob currently hosts the nightly program Rob Schmitt Tonight on Newsmax. He's a native of Carmel, Indiana, and the son of an immigrant from Iran. Rob graduated from the prestigious Indiana University Ernie Pyle School of Journalism and quickly worked his way up to local news stations to network positions at ABC, CBS, NBC, and the Fox News Channel, where most recently Rob anchored Fox and Friends first. Rob joined Newsmax before the 2020 presidential election, which then launched Rob Schmitt Tonight on the network. He's here with us today to talk about his life, his career, the values that sustain him. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, journalist and host, Rob Schmitt. Rob Schmitt's our guest. You know him from many, many aspects of media coverage. He's right now with Newsmax, had been on Fox, ABC, CBS, NBC. This is a man who's been in the business for over 2 decades. And Rob, thanks so much for coming on our program.
Absolutely. Good to be here. Thank you so much.
Rob, I want to ask you, I'm fascinated by a family of origin. I look at my mom and dad, and I know that so much of who I am is who they are. And I mention that because your parents, when you look back on the way they raised you, what did
Yeah.
they do right, and what do you get from them?
What did they do right? Well, I tell you what, I was raised tough by my dad. My dad was a really tough guy. And I think that for a long time it was difficult for me, but as I get older, I look around and I kind of see what I feel is a big part of the decline of our society is that we just have
Mm,
we have a lot of softness and we have a lot of entitlement. We have a lot of
yeah.
I don't know. We're not building a strong generation the way we used to, in so many
Right.
ways. And I appreciate that more and more as I get older. And I don't know. I would say I was raised an only child.
Okay.
And which, funny enough, is because my mom didn't want to have kids, which is something my aunt told me when I was 30 years old, and my jaw was just on the jaw was on the floor. So I was like a negotiation. It was like a one and done thing. I was like, okay, mom, I guess.
We're real glad you made it
Um,
out. We're real glad.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just barely got here. So, but yeah, no, it was a good. I'm from Indiana, so it was a very kind of wholesome upbringing. Indiana. One thing they do is they make good people. It's like
Yeah.
some of the best people that I know are still just the people that I met in childhood. And as I've moved around, I've lived in a lot of really big cities, and I don't find people of the caliber that I was raised with. It's hard to find.
One
So
of our more recent guests from Indiana was Mike Pence, and I'd say the same thing.
yeah,
Solid, good guy. You can count on his word is his bond, and it's just a.
he lives in my town. Yeah,
Is that true? Yeah,
Carmel, Indiana. Yeah.
I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
what a great guy. He was on with Charlotte, his daughter, and they were just terrific and stuff. Let
Yeah.
me ask you too, because it's such a pressing issue in America now. We have 4 million opinions on migration and immigration. I think the first book I read cover to cover, one of them anyway, was A Nation of Immigrants by President Kennedy, 1961. I mention that because mom is from another country. So I'm wondering,
Yes.
as a child of immigrants, what are we supposed to do to make this thing get better?
So that's a great conversation because my mother is an Iranian,
Okay.
and she came here. So Iran used to have a very Western friendly government, before
Yeah.
1979,
Right.
and my mother's family. They were wealthy in Iran. They were very close to the Shah, which was the leader that was overthrown
Right.
when Iran fell into an Islamic theocracy, which it has been for the last 45 years. It's just
Mm.
terrible now. I mean, they destroyed the whole country.
Yeah.
My mom is the biggest Trump supporter ever, despite being an immigrant. So the idea that people try to claim that, oh, I get a lot of people trying to chirp me on Twitter saying, your mother's an immigrant. How dare you talk this way about illegal immigration? It's like, well, you don't get it.
Right.
Her family came here all throughout the 70s and 80s. They came here. She was one of 10. They're all of her brothers and sisters are here now. They all came here, and the first things all the men did was I don't expect this anymore, but they all changed their names to English names. They
Mm.
immediately learned the language. They immediately adopted the American culture in every way they could, and they embraced this country as the country that kind of saved them. I think today we have people that come in as refugees, and they kind of give the middle finger to the country, and they say we want to keep our own culture, and we want to we want to live the way we want to live, and you should respect. It's like it doesn't work like that.
Right.
You can't have a country with many different cultures. You can have many different religions, and you can have cultural influences, but you can't have people that say, no, I'm Chinese and I'm not American, I'm just living here using the system. And I think
Mhm.
that's a big problem. That was the famous line from Angela Merkel when they started importing all of the Middle East and North Africans. She
Mhm.
said they realized at some points they said multiculturalism just doesn't work. You can't have we all have to be German, or we all have to be French. Now you can
Right.
be French Algerian or whatever,
Hmm.
but I mean you have to be French. You have to embrace the culture of the country you live in, or it doesn't work. We don't um,
Yeah.
we don't gel.
Yeah.
So I think with immigration, it's obviously what they're doing right now is
Not working.
infuriating to Americans
Yeah.
and not working at all. But I mean, it's to just open up, the gates like this is, in my opinion, treasonous.
Yeah.
What they're doing because of what's the chief job when you lead the country? You have to protect the people of the country. You have to protect the country. They've abandoned all of that for political reasons. I mean, this is I don't know that they're going to get much benefit out of it in this election, but mark
Right.
my words, in the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to figure out a way to get amnesty. And they're going to have 20 or 30 million people in this country that all feel like they owe Joe Biden and the Democrat Party a big favor.
Yeah.
And what's that going to mean? I mean, the last election was won by 40,000 votes. Think about that. I
Yeah.
mean, think about what they're trying to implement. This is a long game that they're doing right now. They're not going to vote in this next election. We get that. And they're gaslighting us by saying, oh, they can't vote. You know that. Wait 10 years. Wait 10
Yeah.
years and see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob Schmitt's our guest of Newsmax fame, also of Fox as well. But I want to ask you this because I'm intrigued by it. The media, you've been working in it for so long, Rob, and you have this
Yeah.
great reputation. But not unlike my church, actually, which has got to do some rebuilding of its reputation after all the scandals. But
Sure.
when you have a majority of people in America who do not trust the media because they feel it's not being a fair representation of journalistic integrity, do you have any ideas, as a guy who's been in the business for a while, of how does the media rebuild its reputation so that the days of Walter Cronkite return and we actually believe what they're saying instead of saying this is just a point of view?
I don't know that they can. I mean, this
Mm.
is one of the things that I mean, I've worked for CBS, ABC, NBC. I've
Mm.
been all around. Um, I've never. I was never really aware. One thing that Trump did better than anything, and I'll be the first to admit, when Trump first started saying the fake news, media is the enemy of the people, I cringed so hard, and I was
Yeah.
like, that's the worst thing he could be saying. 8 years later,
Yeah.
I not only agree with it, but I'm blown away by how fraudulent the media is. I mean, right now Fauci's testifying in front of the House. It's on your TV as we're doing this interview, and it's just what they conceal to promote their own agenda. I mean, the fact that you have, I mean, the media will not cover what happens today by and large. They will not cover the fact that this man so obviously threw money to this organization in the UK that then funneled it into China so that they could do research that was deemed too dangerous in this country. So what do? They outsource it to a country with far less regulations, and our money paid for the research that led to the pandemic. And maybe the pandemic was maybe it wasn't a bioweapon, and there's all these theories about it. It could just be that they were trying to do something virtuous and trying to figure out a way to beat viruses in the future. This is very possible.
Yeah.
The fact is that this research was deemed to be far too dangerous. So they arrogantly said, well, I don't care. We're going to do it somewhere else. And they did it somewhere more dangerous. And they funded the creation of a pandemic. And then to add insult to injury, they come out there and they say, oh, they deny everything. They start covering it up. We have emails here from Fauci's assistant to Peter Daszak, this guy at EcoHealth Alliance in the UK. And all of this is factual. It's all been found through FOIA requests. It's emails you cannot deny. And the media just doesn't cover the fact. I mean, this is one of the biggest stories the last 30 years. And broadly speaking, you're not going to see it on the CBS Evening News. You're not going to see it on
Right.
NBC. You're not going to see it anywhere. They're going to cover for this guy. I mean, the media has aligned with our government and
Yeah.
has become we basically, from the mainstream, we have effectively state-run media. And the way that the government has achieved this is by saying that the right is so dangerous that you have to embrace us. And
Yeah.
they've coordinated this, and this has happened over the last 10 years. And it was always liberal. The media was always left. We always knew that for the last 30 years. That's how Roger Ailes made so much money. That's how Fox was born.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but we knew that. But it's changed now, and it's now it's like you're never going to see hard questions for anybody on the left. You're
Yeah.
going to see them constantly assailing the right, and especially the religious right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, we are now the threat to democracy. This is how they've done it.
Right.
That's very scary. I don't know that they can fix this because it's just so embedded in these organizations. I think the solution for most people is, if you want to watch ABC, if you want to wake up to Good Morning America, and you want to do these things, okay, fine. Do yourself a favor and watch one show in conservative media before you go to bed,
Yeah.
and at least get both sides. You're going to find
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah.
find that you're going to see a completely different set of stories, and you're going to be blown away by what one network didn't tell you.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Rob, it goes to something I was reacting to recently in the preaching in church. But whatever Harrison Butker said, he's allowed to say it. He went to a Catholic college. He
Yeah.
spoke his truth, and that's fine. But I then watched Hoda the next day on the Today Show, and she was apoplectic. Well, the women on The View were apoplectic. And they don't even want us to say some of the things we're thinking and some of the things we're feeling. And it was troubling to me that they can't say, well, thank God Whoopi Goldberg, of all people, said, but he has a right to his opinion. That's the First Amendment.
Yes.
Now, let's go to foreign policy for a minute. Rob Schmitt has not only been reporting the news and talking through journalistic enterprises for years, but he's also been on the scene. And I'm fascinated that you actually, unlike most of us who have read about Ukraine, have actually been to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Do you have any hope that that wonderful little nation can resist the oppression of Russia?
I mean, it's obviously it's being funded here in the United States. I think Ukraine is a very complicated issue because there's obviously there's a wariness, for
Yeah.
conservatives to continue funding this war, which I think is completely understandable when you think about the fact that this war never had to happen. I don't think Ukraine deserves nearly the they get there's a lot of trash talking about the country, and I don't think that
Mm.
they fully deserve that. I think the fury of the situation that this incompetent State Department's gotten us into. I think people are wary after 20 years of nonstop wars when you can, in Afghanistan, Iraq. People are sick of seeing our treasure going overseas to defend countries that we're largely disinterested in, that are not, Ukraine's not technically a NATO ally. But I don't think they don't deserve to be, the scrutiny that they get. I think that
What did you find over there? What kind of people we
when I
talking
went there, I went there in the very early, in the beginning of the war. I went to interview Zelensky, and at that point, it was not so divisive. Everybody kind of
about?
agreed that this is bad what's happening to Ukraine. Both parties supported the fact that that this is not right. Obviously, Russia is the aggressor. Russia are the bad guys. I think that's still true today without question.
Yeah.
And I found a guy that was just trying to win a war. He seemed very relatable, although we didn't speak the same language. So, the way I read him from the amount of time we spent together, which was only about a half hour, I didn't see a bad person.
Mm.
I didn't see this corrupt person that, that I think's being spun. I don't think that that's necessarily true. But what I will say about Ukraine is that when this thing began, and when Russia began lining up on that northern border, um, and the best criticism I've seen of it is, and you hear this from a lot of people in the Trump State Department that also agree that Russia's wrong here and that Ukraine, should resist, and obviously they are. But the point was, there was no effort to stop this thing from becoming a war. It was almost as if our State Department was just saying, let's just do a war. There was no diplomacy. There was no. I mean, it was like the State Department and Tony Blinken just went zip and just invited this in. There was no. I mean, had this been different, I think had you had a State Department in there that had cojones, they would have, like Trump's State Department, they would have been able to stop this thing before it started. They would have made a negotiation, and you wouldn't have hundreds of thousands of people dead and billions of dollars spent. I think this is an example of the war machine. I think it rightly should be said that Vladimir Putin, even though he's him and Trump are best friends, according to the media in this country. He didn't do anything for those 4 years, and all of a sudden he got very aggressive the moment Trump left. I mean, who can deny that?
Rob Schmitt's our guest from Newsmax. And going back to Newsmax for a moment, then I want to come back to foreign policy. And I admit up front that I have known and liked Chris Ruddy as a friend for many years, but he is the brains behind Newsmax. And I'm just wondering, how does a guy like Christopher Ruddy, and and you work with him, how does he come up with this idea that there is a hunger in the American market for another voice? And how do you make it happen when so many of the cards are in the hands of the powerful left government?
So I think that's one of the hardest things when you're the new guys on the block, which we are.
Yeah,
Fox has been around since I think '95,
right.
and it was obviously the first guys in the pool are gonna really hit the lottery, right? I mean, if you're the first person to try something and it hits, you're set, and that's Fox. To go conservative in media, I mean, that's how they've created such a dynamo. We were later to the game. Carving out a portion is really hard. I also think it's really difficult because the left has such an incredible cancel culture machine
Yeah.
that they utilize against advertisers. They utilize, against carriers, and they try to basically make us disappear in every way that they possibly can. This is who they are. They suppress. They are anti-freedom. They're anti-free speech. This is what they are. So we've been able to do a pretty remarkable job of cornering a certain section of the audience, considering we're in such a tough spot. It's very, very difficult to carve out, especially in television.
Mm,
Being a new network when people are so programmed. There's 7, 8 networks that have been mainstream for a long time. To be a new guy it's tough to carve out. You just your Q rating's not that high. People have their places that they go. But we've been able to carve out something pretty good here.
yeah.
It's a very delicate thing that we have to manage, I think, very delicately, and manage our audience and make sure that that we're attentive to what they want and what they need. That's
Mm,
most of my job is just making sure that I appreciate and that I serve the audience well to give them a reason to keep coming back, because we don't have a lot of the weapons that every other network has, the
mm,
massive amounts of money and everything else like that. I mean, we're a little more pure. I mean, there's the downside is we don't have all the toys, but we're also not corrupted by having massive corporate, ad buyers that demand certain things, that don't want you talking about other things. You're not going to see Pfizer stamped all over our programming, and all these other massive corporations that influence the coverage that you get from media.
of the many over the years, I've been doing this since I was very young, interviewing people. And the first guy I had, the biggest guest I had at the time, was the film director Frank Capra. It's a Wonderful Life. Mr. Smith Goes to
Yeah,
Washington. But I mention it because in It's a Wonderful Life, and it's very much Capra's philosophy, would be that scene early on where they're going to save George Bailey from suicide, and
yeah.
Clarence, the guardian angel, says, "Oh, is he sick? What's the matter?" And they say, "No, worse than sick. He's discouraged." I mention that in the context of, Rob, when you look at the world and you look at it all the time, and you look at our country and you explore it all the time, that question of being discouraged or being a person of hope, how does Rob Schmitt keep hope alive for himself?
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah,
It really is. It's a wonderful movie.
sure.
I I guess the best thing you can keep is this perspective that how many times in our past have we probably felt like this is it? You
Mm,
know, I mean, how many times has this world been through, you know, horrible moments? Can you imagine how terrified Europe was in 1942? You know, at that point with Hitler cruising to victory at that point, seemingly. I mean, they probably thought it was the end of the world. The world goes on. I mean, it continues on. We right now we're looking at the cultural landscape in this country, and you're just seeing this absolute rapid Marxist cultural decline that we're seeing all around us in our college campuses, out on our streets. It's terrifying to people.
yeah.
But I just feel like the perspective is that I think if you look back on history, read a little history, you might find that we've been scared before, we've come out of it before. I think right now the hope is that, I mean, look at the tremendous swing we've seen, whether you like Donald Trump or not. Um, we are rapidly moving away from this sweeping leftism that's been moving through our culture. I mean, we've been moving left really fast, in my opinion, the last few years, and that has come to an abrupt halt. And I think a lot, and it gives me so much confidence in the American people, because the left controls the media, they control the education, they control so many different things, they control the corporate interest by and large. Um, but people can see through that somehow, and that's amazing to me to see. I mean, who would have ever thought? Would you have taken the bet that in June of 2024 that Trump would be up a few points on Joe Biden? Would you have
Never.
ever made that bet 2 years ago? I would have
No.
never laid that bet down.
Yeah.
My buddy's, he's got a bookie, and he just showed the betting websites have Trump up right, pretty substantial amount over Biden right now in the election. And that's when you look at the money. I always look at the money when you're looking at politics, because the money is the smartest thing in the world, much smarter than polls or anything else, where people are putting their money. And if Trump's got a lead, in Vegas, because you can bet on anything, that tells me a lot. And it just tells me that there's a big shift in this country. People are waking up to all of this. Yeah.
Rob Schmitt's our guest from Newsmax, and I promise I'm going to wrap this soon. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Obama a few times, Rob, and one of the last surveys I've been able to find of voter patterns in media are that at least 8 out of 10 people in major media voted for Obama against McCain. So let's move from the Trump thing. And I mentioned that because here's my question. Um, Obviously, then the media is very much a creature of the left, of the Democratic Party. But I'm wondering, why is it that folks like yourself and many others who have a more traditional or mainstream bent don't get into media? Like, why is it that 8 out of 10 people voted for Obama? It would seem to me that in a fair America, half would have gone for McCain, half would have gone for Obama, but that's not what happens. Why?
That is the big mystery, isn't it? I don't know that I have an explanation for that. I've always thought about it the same way as you, though. I just what is it about? I think that it's generally that journalists kind of revere themselves as carrying the voice of the downtrodden, or supporting the against this evil machine at the top, or something like that. I think
Right, right.
it's something like that. I mean, it's hard for me to kind of specifically
Yeah,
put it into words, but the great irony is, of course, that right now we've now seen all of these journalists that we have, and they're fully aligned with this government that's showing increasing signs of tyranny and authoritarianism. And I mean, they have all these indicators, and of course they're trying to control all of our lives for good. That's the line, and it's always the line. Tyranny always comes in some kind of form of push for equity. Ask any country that's ever fallen into communism.
yeah.
But it's the great irony is that everything that they once stood for in our mainstream media. I mean, it's amazing that they were captured so quickly by the machine that runs this country. And and they have been.
I'm very glad that Schmitt is where he is in terms of being a spokesperson in media. But I got to ask you, Rob, because you worked, as you mentioned, for CBS, ABC, NBC. If you had, at the very beginning of your career, been as forthcoming about some of the more traditional ideas you have, would you ever have been hired?
No,
Yeah.
no, it's you really can't. It's funny. I used to work at NBC here in New York, and yeah, I had a lot of good people I worked with that I were very friendly with. And I flipped through my Instagram, and I noticed a lot of them don't follow me anymore. And I'm still really good friends with one of the girls that works there. And she's, we hang out and stuff. She's nice, normal, moderate person, not really political either way. And she's like, everybody over there's just like, can you believe what happened to him? It's like, what happened to me? I mean, like, there's still a couple of them that are cool, that are either conservative or kind of middle of the road and kind of can see the woods for the trees. But a
Yeah.
lot of them are just completely indoctrinated with this just general leftist media position that they all seem to embrace.
Yeah.
And it is funny, but yeah, you wouldn't be able to espouse. I mean, it's when you watch media right now, if you watch like local news, because they do a lot of Trump stuff, which
Right.
isn't really local news, but they cover it anyway because it's ratings. And you just see them. Everything has to come with a very negative view of Trump. I mean, if you actually had a local news anchor, in any kind of positive way, tell a Trump story for 30 seconds, I don't think he'd survive that. I really don't. I'm not sure he would.
I wrote recently, and I know they won't publish it, to the New York Times saying, okay, I read the opinion section, I read the paper every day. Everybody on staff hates Trump. I get it. So who can out hate Trump? Having said what you want to say and hated them as much as you can we find a way to work with people? And I don't expect them to publish that letter, but it's sad to me.
Yeah.
Listen, Rob, let me
Yeah.
just ask you this. You are a great voice and a delightful voice. Um, do you hope to continue to see more Rob Schmitts out there?
I hope so. I mean, I hope that we can. I think the one thing that we should be doing is going into colleges and
Hmm.
trying to get, these. There's a lot of kids that aren't buying into this at all. You know, get them into podcasting, get them into. One thing I think has really exploded lately that I've really noticed is, on social media, I'm seeing a lot more conservative content just bubbling up, because I think people have realized those first few people that did it have gotten so big that they're like, wow, I can actually say what I feel. Because you've got, I mean, when Rogan started doing it, and then you had all these, and all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, Elon Musk is like a little bit kind of conservative, and
Yeah.
I mean, all these people came out of the shadows, and all of a sudden, that's so important for people to realize that you can believe what you want to believe still in this country. Because I think, I mean, they always say it's the silent majority, right? I
Yeah.
think it's really silent because people are terrified. I mean, it's my girlfriend works in a here in New York, and at a PR for like like fashion kind of PR stuff like that, cosmetic PR.
Right.
Everybody in that business is militantly left,
Yeah.
and it's like, I mean, she's not even. I mean, she's like, I couldn't even imagine posting anything pro Trump on my social media. I mean, she was like, I would get skewered, I'd get eaten alive, and it's just like it's a cult, and they and they will not allow anybody else in, and that's law firms, that's most corporate jobs. I mean, it's like you have to be very careful. That's not right.
And think
It's not
about
right.
that. They will not allow in people who reflect at least half the country, which is kind of
No,
sad to cut out half the
very
country.
sad.
Rob, I've been doing this interview stuff for over 3 decades, and I mention that because I get used to, and I'm okay with it, that people measure out what they say, they give canned answers, and I just thank you for being on our program because you have been refreshing and honest and true, and as your own word, authentic. And I think in media we need many, many more voices like that on both sides of the fence to reflect who we really are as a country. So thank you for being on the program, and thank you for your honesty.
Thank you, sir, very much. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You've been probably listening to this show on the Catholic channel at 129 on Sirius XM. We're also seen on YouTube. Search under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. In addition to acting as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking, I'm also the pastor of Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Massapequa Park, New York, where we post daily Mass on YouTube. So please join us at Mass, as well as on our interview program, Personally Speaking. Please share and let others know about Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.